This is Alexi and Matthew here, wanting to talk about the removal of Confederate statues across the U.S. brought on by the violent rally in Charlottesville. The rally had been called together by white nationalists to protest the decision to remove a Confederate statue of General Robert E. Lee and to rename parks dedicated to Confederate leaders. The court system had managed to halt the removal for 6 months, but could no longer avoid the order to have them taken down. The violence in Charlottesville was preceded in May when prominent white nationalist Richard Spencer led a march through the city wielding torches. In July, around 50 Ku Klux Klan members, even some in their robes, went to the city, waving Confederate flags and were met by 1,000 counter-protesters. Most police intervention was against the counter-protesters, going as far as tear gas, pepper spray, and arrests. Members of the alt-right, a conservative movement mixed with racism, white nationalism, and populism, had been meeting in Lee Park, now known as Emancipation Park, and were met with counter-protesters and anti-fascist protesters. The violence broke out when a truck plowed through the crowd of counter-demonstrators, killing a woman and injuring 19 people. These struggles are a key example of culture wars mentioned in Chapter 1 of our ebook. Ideals rooted in the South and other once Confederate states are clashing with Black Americans and people who feel the statues are symbols of oppression and dark past. The video presentation on Point of View that we all watched in the auditorium mentioned that the perspective of people can be different and will sometimes bring conflict. In this case, the Confederate statues are a constant reminder of Black African Americans of slavery and years of oppression, while white nationalists see the statues as their heritage. But the actions of violence, especially the video that surfaced of a white nationalist male shooting into the crowd of anti-protesters, only seems to hint that these groups are motivated by hate.
Many people arguing for the statues to remain where they are claim that the statues are a part of their heritage. But taking Charlottesville into a lens again, the statues of General Lee and the Jackson Monument were built as warnings to the Black community. The statue of Lee was built in 1924, not after the Civil War, during the peak of Jim Crow and Vinegar Hill, a Black neighborhood. It sent out a message to the growing, successful Black community that the public areas were not for them. It was meant to scare and oppress. The Jackson Monument was built in what was once a majority Black neighborhood, McKee Row, which was confiscated from the Black residents and given to the city on accounts that they were getting rowdy. It was built in the proximal area of an old whipping post and where a jail used to be. The Lee and Jackson parks had been put into commission as undercover acts of gentrification, the process of renovating and improving a house or district so that it conforms to middle-class taste. It disrupted prosperous Black communities by uprooting homes, businesses, and anything that could possibly put Black Americans in positions to gain wealth or power. Also removing and relocating statues include Lexington, Kentucky, Tampa, Florida, New York City, New York, and Durham, Wisconsin. A 9-foot-tall monument was asked to be removed by the United Daughters of the Confederacy in Missouri to prevent further vandalism. Florida, Georgia, Texas, Washington, and Richmond, Virginia are considering removing statues and monuments. In Alabama, a monument in Lynn Park was draped over and covered up with plywood as state law prohibits the city from taking down the monument. Arizona has left it to the public to decide on whether or not to remove memorials, and Pennsylvania seems to make no move to remove any of 1,300 plus monuments, markers, and plaques in Gettysburg National Park. In California, Gainesville, Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, Baltimore, Maryland, St. Louis, Missouri, and Franklin, Ohio, memorials and statues were moved either within a day or week after the violent outbreak in Charlottesville, or some months prior in agreements with museums or on request. The University of Texas in Austin removed 4 Confederate statues, which will be relocated to other places for scholarly study. So far, except for the monument knocked down by protesters in Charlottesville and some others, Confederate memorials and things are being moved and placed elsewhere without much problem. It would be better for them to be moved before protesters of any kind begin to vandalize them and cause even bigger problems. White nationalist groups claim these monuments to be their heritage, their culture. So if they're so important politically and historically to them, a viable and possible solution to this issue is to move the monuments, flags, and memorabilia into museums in order for them to be placed into historical context. With the items in museums, they'll be safe from further vandalism, and anyone wishing to see the monuments can go on down to the nearest museum and look upon the past. Thanks for watching this video, and we hope you enjoy it.